Has Donald Trump finally met his match in Harvard University? Now, I've been bringing you stories about how Trump has been at loggerheads with American universities, about protests, about their international students for a while. But now it seems like that escalating battle has found its first major resistance in Harvard University. Now, this is of interest to us in India because we have so many loved ones who are currently either studying in the US in those universities or planning to go to the US. So remember, like, share, subscribe, and sign up for our membership if you can. If there's someone who finds this video useful, you think, please share the video with them. So this is what's happening. Trump has announced that Harvard will lose $2.2 billion in grants and contracts from the American government after Harvard rejected the government's demands to limit activism on the campus. After that, Trump, in one of his social media posts, has said Harvard stands to lose its tax break for not listening to the government. Now, where does Harvard get its gumption from? Harvard University is 140 years older than the country USA. It has an endowment that's greater than the GDP of several countries, and it's educated 8 American presidents. It was founded in 1636 and the US was officially only established in 1776. So it is the oldest and richest university in the US, and in spite of all of this targeting, it seems to be holding its ground. Let me first tell you what has happened so far. Now, Trump administration has frozen $2.2 billion in federal funding to Harvard University, and because it has not met a list of demands by the government. Now, the Department of Education task force is apparently combating antisemitism. And it has accused Harvard of, and I'm quoting here, troubling entitlement mindset that is endemic to our nation's most prestigious universities and colleges. Effectively, there is a view within the Trump administration that pro-Palestinian protests, so protests calling for an end to Israel's attack on Gaza, is actually anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic, and that's the view it's taking. Now, there is another view that that what Trump is trying to do is remove what they call the liberal stronghold on their education institutions. Now, this funding freeze comes after the Trump administration only last month reviewed $9 billion in federal contracts and grants to Harvard as part of a crackdown in its anti-Semitism view that has erupted in college campuses in the last 18 months. Now, Trump has also gone as far as to threaten that tax break, like I told you, and this is what he put on social media. Perhaps Harvard should lose its tax break status and be taxed as a political entity because it is pushing political, ideological, terrorist-inspired, supporting sickness, is what he has said on social media. Remember, tax exempt status is totally contingent to acting in public interest, end quote. Now, losing that tax exemption will cost Harvard millions of dollars each year. Later, after this post went out, the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump wanted the university to apologize to him and his administration. She said Trump wants to see Harvard apologize. Harvard should apologize. Now, let's take a look at where Harvard gets its money from and how much it will hurt to lose this $2.2 billion from the government. Now, this 2.2 is actually a fraction of the total 9 billion that Harvard gets, from the government. But I must also point out to you that Harvard has a fairly strong endowment that is independent of government as well. Now, from government, it gets about $9 billion of federal funding, $7 billion going to the university's affiliated hospitals. So there are about 11 hospitals in and around the Boston region, and $11 billion goes to those hospitals, and they do a lot of research and they work on a lot of problems. $2 billion goes to research grants granted for Harvard, including space exploration, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, and tuberculosis. So it's not clear when you say there's a funding freeze, which of these programs is actually going to be frozen and which will be allowed to continue. Now, the Trump administration, what have they actually asked for? So it apparently has sent a list of demands to Harvard, saying that if you meet these demands, we will continue the 9 billion total. But right now they've frozen 2.2 billion. Now the letter that it was sent to Harvard has been made public by the New York Times, and the letter describes Harvard's federal money as a taxpayer investment that is subject to performance. Now in the letter it says Harvard has, and I'm quoting, failed to protect American students and faculty from anti-Semitic violence. The letter called for a ban on face masks, which is basically, it's also, this demand was made to Columbia University, saying that pro-Palestinian protesters have been using face masks to hide their identity. It also said Harvard must clarify its campus speech policies, and the academic departments of Harvard that have fueled anti-Semitic harassment must be reviewed. And Trump called for sweeping reforms in the university's governance, in its leadership, in the way it hires and the way it effectively runs its campus. Now, in that letter, there were 10 demands. One, reporting students to the federal government who are hostile to American values. There's no clear understanding of what hostile means. Ensuring each academic department is viewpoint diverse. Hiring external government-approved party to audit programs and departments that fuel anti-Semitic harassment, and checking faculty staff for plagiarism. And the letter basically orders the university to take disciplinary action for violations during protests. So what has Harvard said in response to this? Harvard's president, Alan Garber, has written back, and he said that the government is attempting to control the Harvard community and threaten the school's values as a private institution. And he also said no government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. He said that basically the work of addressing our own shortcomings and fulfilling our commitment is our work to undertake as a private community. He also said that the university doesn't take lightly the fight against anti-Semitism, and effectively the main thing he said was, even though the government seems to be talking about anti-Semitism, majority of what they have asked for is regulation of the intellectual conditions of Harvard. Now, Harvard is not like the only community or the only university that the Trump government has targeted, right? They've targeted Columbia University in New York, where they froze $400 million in grants about a month ago. But what happened after that was Columbia effectively agreed to the demands of the government. The university's board of trustees endorsed all of those changes and said that they believe it's in line with the school's values. Princeton University, the administration suspended $210 million of university grants. The president of Princeton wrote in a message to the university that the full rationale of this action is not yet clear. Cornell and Northwestern last week, $1 billion in funding of Cornell and $790 million in funding for Northwestern was frozen by the American government. And neither university said that it knew what was happening until it read about it in the press. Northwestern said it has fully cooperated with the investigations. Cornell has announced it's joining a lawsuit challenging this. But Harvard really the first one to reject it outright. In fact, there's a reaction from President Obama, who has said that former President Obama, I beg your pardon, who has said that Harvard has set an example to other higher education institutions by rejecting, I'm quoting here, the unlawful, ham-handed attempt to stifle academic freedom. Let's hope other institutions follow. Bernie Sanders has also said something similar. But effectively, here's the thing, right? The question is, now that Harvard has stood its ground, will that give other universities sort of the fillip to do so? Harvard could have, and some of the analysts who are looking at it, is it could have injected an energy into the other universities to say, hey, let's all like now collectively stand up to this and stop it. Now, Michael Luttig, who's a prominent federal appeals court judge, he's a retired judge, and he's also respected by many conservatives from Trump's corner of the politics. He has said that this will be a turning point in the president's rampage against American universities. So the administration's fight with Harvard could actually set a standard. In fact, the New York Times article has actually said that Harvard's stance will be seen by liberalism as a chance to fight. So what Trump is trying to do, like I said, is loosen the liberal grip on universities as it's viewed. But could this also then give other targets of Trump's onslaught. For example, law firms, courts, media, other portions of administration, to stand up and to fight back. Even say members of the armed forces who've lost their jobs, members who are within the government who've lost their jobs, to stand up and say, no, we're going to do this, we're going to push back. Because so far, Trump has not received any pushback at all. So what's likely to actually play out is a high-profile court battle between the White House and Harvard. In the meantime, I know that there are a lot of international students who are sort of waiting and watching to see how this plays out, and who are staying very close to their admissions offices and their visa offices within their universities, keeping their heads down to see how this plays out. But in the meantime, for everyone who disagrees with the way Trump is doing things, they have found a champion in Harvard University. Leave me a comment if you think there are parallels of this across the world, if you think Harvard is doing the right thing, and if you think other universities should stand up as well.